Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a single, really extraordinary piece of source material. It's a sermon from Reverend Sun Moon delivered back in 1980, and it's titled Total Self-Reevaluation.
That's right.
And this isn't just, a theological address. It's a blueprint for universal history, a searing political critique of America, and a highly disciplined mandate for every single member of the Unification Church.
Exactly. The date is September 14th, 1980 at Belvedere. And this address, it really defined the movement's mission for decades. If you want to understand their worldview in that critical era, this is the document.
It really is.
That lays out this grand historical scope, their claim to consummate all previous religious efforts and finalize what they call the dispensation of God.
So our mission today is to unpack this vision for you. We need to get a grasp on the historical debt they claim they were settling, a specific political context of 1980 that they believed demanded this immediate action, and most importantly, this highly structured, almost mathematical mission of home church that was imposed on its followers. It's a deep dive into a worldview where history and theology, they violently intersect.
To put it simply, indemnity means paying a price, a penalty, a compensation to restore something that was damaged or lost.
So what exactly was lost, and what kind of price are we talking about here?
The loss, according to the source, is everything. I mean, everything that went wrong since the beginning. All historical tragedy, all human entanglement, it's all traced back to the failure of the first man, Adam. So because humanity lost its intended relationship with God through one man's failure, the entire course of history has been spent trying to, pay back that debt. Therefore, the final religion must liquidate all of it. The failures of Judaism, the failures of Christianity, and the failures of the external world, and end this long-standing spiritual war against Satan.
And here's the kicker, the timeline. It couldn't follow the pattern of previous religions, which took hundreds, even thousands of years to get established.
Precisely. The source material is very clear that these tremendous accumulated debts must be paid quickly, in full. And crucially, they must be paid in one generation.
One generation.
They can't be dragged out over centuries anymore. If the failure came through one man, Adam, then the restoration must come through one God-sent man who successfully completes the mission in his own lifetime.
Which sets this immediate, just monumental expectation on Reverend Moon himself as the true Adam.
It does.
And this really highlights the historical role of past religions, right? Judaism and Christianity weren't just seen as failures in isolation.
Exactly. They were seen as failures to successfully prepare the way for the ultimate restorer.
So they had a job to do.
They had a job to do. They were meant to prepare the foundation, specifically by unifying the historical forces of what they call the Cain and Abel lines.
Okay, so just think of this framework as unifying the divided good and evil forces in history.
Right. Abel represents the forces aligned with God's will. Cain represents the opposing fallen forces. Judaism and Christianity were tasked with creating a world of unified able forces, ready to receive the restorer.
But the sermon makes this really powerful and controversial claim that both Christianity and the primary central nation, America, failed in that role.
And that failure takes us straight into the political and historical cauldron of 1980.
Right.
This is where the source material gets intensely specific about geopolitics. The United States is assigned this crucial dispensational role. Reverend Moon describes America as the central nation, summoned by Providence and likened to an assemblage of all historical Abels.
So all the good forces from around the world gathered in one place.
That's the idea, to create one strong external Abel force. Its mission was to resist the worldwide Cain forces.
Which are explicitly identified as communism.
Explicitly. The source even points to history, noting that America's participation expedited victory in both World War I and World War II, showing God's assistance in its role as the central democratic champion.
Okay, so you have America, the central nation, and the Unification Church.
The central religion.
And the source argues that these two must meet and absolutely unite. That's the critical dynamic.
The stakes could not be higher. I mean, the source material says that America and Christianity must either totally unite with the UC or they stand in opposition.
And if they oppose?
If they oppose, they step into the role of Satan. It's a theological declaration that opposition to the movement is opposition to God's final plan.
That is a truly catastrophic consequence. So given those stakes, how did the source justify the claim that the U.S. and Christianity were failing in 1980?
Well, they pointed to the 40 years leading up to that address, so 1940 to 1980, and claimed these were the 40 most chaotic years in history.
The most.
The argument was that Christianity, at 2,000 years old, and the American nation, 200 years old, had just fundamentally failed to create the moral and political unity that was required.
And what was the observable evidence of that failure? What did they point to?
The source points to what it calls rampant satanic influence and a total collapse of morality. Drugs, free sex, and a general liberalism just permeating society. The claim was that communism had succeeded precisely because of this moral and spiritual failure of the central nation and its religion.
So liberalism in this worldview wasn't just a political ideology.
Not at all. It was called the forefront of communism in this country.
That is an incredibly potent claim to make at that time, with the Cold War at its peak. And the source doesn't shy away from naming names, does it? It specifically critiques the administration at the time.
Not at all. It explicitly mentions the Carter administration, saying communists were smiling the most because America was falling back under that leadership.
And that leads to a clear political alignment.
A very clear one. The sermon outlined support for Ronald Reagan as the better of the two presidential candidates because America desperately needed an ultra-conservative champion to resist this perceived communist infiltration.
And it's so crucial for us to note here, we are just impartially reporting on the specific claims and the political alignment expressed in the source material itself. It views this entire geopolitical landscape through the lens of a final spiritual war.
And because of this perceived failure, this double indemnity owed by history in America, the Unification Church claimed it had to pay that debt in its first 20 years, from 1960 to 1980.
And once that indemnity was paid, the focus had to shift.
Completely. It shifts internally, structurally, because the external foundation, America, was seen as failing its mission. So the entire mandate then turns inward, focusing intensely on rebuilding the divine structure at its most basic unit, the family.
That's a radical pivot, isn't it? If past religions focused on saving the individual's soul, why did this source pivot so hard to defining success through the family?
Because the failure was seen as starting in the first family, Adam and Eve. So restoration has to secure the right foundation at the family level. The Unification Church emphasized the family as the building block of the kingdom of heaven.
Which is why their huge wedding ceremonies, the blessings, became so central to their identity.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the crucial numerical structures in the address, starting with the 36 blessed couples.
Okay.
The 36 couples are foundational. They represent the restoration of tribal history, specifically linking back to the idea of 3 generations of 12. They're defined as the ancestral chiefs of the heavenly tribes.
Or living ancestors.
Living ancestors. They establish the vertical lineage that was lost.
And the source makes it clear that these couples have profound spiritual authority. I mean, they're entitled to attend the welcoming banquet for the true Adam and can even admit others.
Absolutely. They become the historical foundation, and their status must be respected no matter what their background was. Even if they were described, and this is the language of the source, as simple fishermen or crippled or ugly ancestors, their position is about their spiritual role.
We also have this powerful anecdote in the source that really illustrates the radical break with the fallen world's tradition.
Yes, the description of the controversial 1961 wedding of the 36 couples. The source explains that parents were intentionally notified only 1 week before the wedding.
Just 1 week.
And they were required to wear a white gown.
Why that intentional break? Why disrespect traditional family customs like that?
Well, the spiritual reasoning was direct and pretty uncompromising. The true parents, Reverend Amun and his wife, could not discuss the marriage of their children with fallen parents. They had to establish complete spiritual authority over the lineage, bypassing the corrupted historical tradition of the biological parents to establish a pure heavenly tradition. That act just cemented their role as the spiritual foundation.
So let's turn to the other numbers that define this whole dispensation, because they form this incredibly precise sequence.
They do. The numbers build vertically, representing bigger and bigger spheres of influence. The number 12 represents the family level, Jacob's children, Jesus' disciples.
Okay.
Then the number 72 expands this to the tribe or nation level, representing the 72 elders, or Jesus' 72 disciples. These were the foundations that past restorers tried to build.
And what was the most critical number for the immediate success of this mission?
It's the number 84.
84.
It's the combination of the family and tribal foundations, 12 plus 72. The sermon calls 84 the crucial rock, the foundation which cannot be shaken. This number is presented as the critical, unfulfilled standard in all of history.
So if Jesus had succeeded, what would fulfilling the 84 foundation have meant historically?
It would have meant securing a fully unified physical and spiritual foundation. Securing the 12 disciples and the 72 regional leaders who, together, would have supported him and created an unshakable base. The claim is that because Jesus failed to secure this unified foundation of 84 on earth, he was exposed, opposed, and ultimately crucified.
So for the Unification Church, the contemporary mission absolutely requires laying this foundation of 84 members who are completely secured.
It's non-negotiable.
Okay, so the goal of this generation is to unlock the 84. But the numbers don't stop there. They scale up to the world level.
They do. The sequence expands to 120, representing the world level, symbolically matched by the 120 nations in the UN at the time.
Signaling world evangelization.
Exactly. And finally, the source mentions historical numbers like the 430 couples blessing, which was designed to restore 4,300 years of Korean history and consciously transcend racial barriers. This whole intricate numerical structure, according to the source, is the blueprint for the kingdom of heaven on earth.
So if Reverend Moon has paid the historical debts, the 40 years of indemnity, and laid this numerical groundwork, where is the major role shift next?
It shifts entirely and immediately to the individual members. The source basically says the framework is built, the debt is paid, and now the members have to execute the final stage, building the kingdom through the home church mission.
Home church is defined as the microcosm of the globe. What are the specific, quantifiable requirements?
This mission is hyper-local and very specific. Each member is tasked with tending to 360 homes in their local community.
360.
If they're a couple, the requirement doubles to 720 homes. And this 360 home area is deliberately sized to link back to that significant tribal number, 72. The member has to progress through their community, moving up the ranks of spiritual influence from servant of servant all the way up to parent in that territory.
So the goal for each individual member is to personally fulfill that 84 foundation, the critical rock within their assigned 360 homes.
Precisely. And the sermon emphasizes that home church is the ultimate key. The source warns, what you leave untied in home church will be left untied in heaven.
Wow.
This mandate demands incredible personal discipline. Members must literally earn their salvation through physical, measurable action.
And the nature of that required sacrifice is, it's radical. It seems to demand a fundamental reordering of a member's own life.
It absolutely does. The source instructs members to love the home church mission more than their own spouse or children.
More than their own family.
It's the new higher standard of love. It even validates the biblical warning that your own household will be your enemy, saying this spiritual priority has to supersede family if necessary. It's an uncompromising call to total devotion.
And here's the most tangible, I think the most visceral detail in the whole address, this concept of the museum pieces.
This is where the physical, merit-based standard for salvation really crystallizes. The goal is to set a record of physical suffering. Members are encouraged to wear out their shoes from walking the streets,
To save blood-stained clothes and keep bandages from injuries they got on their mission?
Yes.
And why? Why are these saved items so important?
They are designated as museum pieces that will, according to the source, determine one's place in heaven. It's a literal, quantifiable record of sweat and sacrifice.
So salvation isn't just about faith or belief.
It's about accumulated physical merit displayed through these tangible objects, showing that you paid the price of indemnity in your own body.
And the sermon makes it clear that no one is exempt from this final requirement, not even the most senior leaders or the original 36 couples.
That's right. Even the historical founders, the living ancestors, and top leaders like Bohai Pak have to earn the home church key through their own personal merit to enter heaven.
It's a universal requirement.
Universal, immediate, and measurable. Reverend Moon asserted that his mission in America was finished, that he had laid the foundation, and that he would soon leave, which he did around the time Reagan became president. The time for the members to execute was now.
So let's circle back and just summarize this massive total self-revaluation. The movement claimed to have paid the historical indemnity, those 40 chaotic years. They established the true parents tradition, the numerical structure, and now the entire fate of the dispensation rests on the individual member successfully fulfilling the 84 foundation within their 360 homes.
It is a complete top-down plan for salvation that shifts the ultimate spiritual authority from faith to physical, measurable execution. And it leads us to the final, really challenging thought that the source material leaves for you, the listener.
And what is that final assertion?
The text states it explicitly. I am not the one who decides whether you go to heaven or hell. You alone decide. I cannot say a word unless you have won on your own merit.
Wow.
It emphasizes this radical, personal, and physically verifiable responsibility for your own salvation.
We've seen how this unique theological framework connects all these historical failures. Adam, Moses' first generation, Jesus' inability to secure the 84 to a contemporary, highly disciplined mission. So what does it mean for a religious movement to define its members' ultimate spiritual success, not by faith alone, but by a measurable, physical mandate like compiling a personal collection of worn-out shoes and bandages as proof of merit? That's a provocative concept to close on.
A physical, quantifiable mandate for eternal glory.
Yeah.
A powerful synthesis of effort and destiny.
A deep dive complete. We'll see you next time.